Oh.
Yeah, strike the numbers.
Yes.
Like to get signs.
Oh, that right.
Oh, this is over here. Yeah. I was gonna, then I'm like, here.
Yep, they're moving.
back
there.
That's a great one.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so we're gonna go get started. Everybody's ready? We're almost ready. So I'm super excited because, well, I'm super excited and sad simultaneously. Because this is our last night here, right? But I have to tell you, for those of you who hung in there with us, I really super appreciate it. And I hope that it's been a positive experience for you. I think that some of you will be able to say that, you know, it's changed what you do on a Tuesday morning at 10 a.m., right, Carol? Now instead of like sitting at home and reading the paper with her husband, she's testifying, state agencies or some other place. But it has just been an absolutely wonderful experience for Davis and I, and exactly what we started Arkansas Civic Action Network to do, right, was to try to help bring you tools and tips and ideas and things that would empower you in your journey of civic participation. You know, our biggest hope is that everybody feels like we can make a difference, even though our legislature doesn't always agree that we can make a difference. We're going to keep trying. So just a couple of things by way of housekeeping before we get started. Yes.
Before you start, can I say something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to acknowledge my partner, Gail. Y'all, she's put all of these together. This woman is like amazingly talented and prepared to be in the position she's in. And I just feel blessed to have the opportunity to work with her. But I'd like you to acknowledge the time and energy that was gone into making these things happen. Just join me, because you don't get applause.
Will be my Venmo account. But thank you. No, it's been an absolute pleasure. So, most of you have been with us before, so I won't necessarily go through all of the housekeeping, all of the values. But for those of you who maybe have forgotten, we just want to make sure that we all have a chance to be heard. That's the biggest thing. In this room, everybody's voice matters. So we want to be sure that we hear from everyone, and we do that by listening to learn, by speaking to move the conversation forward, and by just being flat out nice to each other. What? There we go. Last week, just quick review from last week. Last week we talked about direct democracy. And I think the end result of the conversation was that direct democracy is messy. It's going to become even messier as we finish up this legislative session and we attempt to incorporate all of the changes that have been made. While the Constitution creates the opportunity for the people to rule, the legislature has imposed a lot of constraints on us, and it's going to be very difficult for grassroots organizing. But we have faith, right, that we will persevere through that process. And I'm hoping today that David will share a little bit about what you're doing to try to make sure that happens. Legislative Message Center is still the best way to reach people, so I just like to always post that number. They do get those pink slips, and pay attention to them. So today, what we're going to be talking about is the role of the judiciary, right? Which is kind of the final piece of the process. We talked in week 1 about how the legislature is structured. In week 2, we talked about how a bill becomes law. In week 3, we talked about how to make your voice heard. In week 4, we talked about policymaking process. Last week, of course, we talked about direct democracy. Kristen Higgins was here, David. That's who gave our presentation. And so we talked about direct democracy. And then tonight we're going to talk about the judiciary. Now, I've asked our speakers, our esteemed panel here in front of us, to kind of take the frame of how the legislature can be checked by the judiciary. So what is the role the judiciary plays for us in helping to make sure that the laws that are put into place or are passed through committee are fair and just and in alignment with our constitutions. And I'm really excited because each of our 4 panelists tonight has a little bit different perspective. They share similar training in that they are all attorneys, but they have all come through that system a little bit differently. And I think because of that, bring us some really interesting insights. So if I could, I'm just going to read to you their bios real quickly. So immediately to my right, you've met Sarah before. Sarah was here when we talked about the bill making process and tracking bills through. But Sarah Everett is the policy director for the American Civil Liberties Union of Arkansas. She served in a number of capacities over 8 years, including law clerk, legal fellow, staff attorney, policy strategist. Her degree is from the University of Minnesota Law School. I didn't know you were Midwestern.
I'm not. I
went to school there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. Oh, yeah, and her undergraduate was from Harding. Okay, I guess that. So we want to welcome there. And then going to the far end of the table, opposite, we have David Couch. David is an Arkansas trial lawyer and direct democracy advocate. When I was studying, when I was doing my research here in 2021 and 2022, his name came up constantly until finally he agreed to have a cup of coffee with me and tell me everything I needed to know, including his starts in direct democracy, which I think started on a front porch saying, I think the time is now. I think that's how you told me the story. But David also represents elderly people who have been abused and neglected in nursing homes. And since 2001, he has successfully represented individuals neglected here in Arkansas, but in 20 other states as well. In his role as direct democracy advocate, he has sponsored and ran efforts to enact campaign finance and lobbying reforms, including medical marijuana, 2 increases in minimum wage, statewide alcohol availability. Thank you, David. Casino gaming. Thank you, David. Independent redistricting, open primaries, ranked choice voting, and government transparency. And he is currently working on measures to remove the sales tax on period products and diapers. We actually had, Shani was here with us last week too.
Good, Shani.
So we heard a little bit about that and the effort to protect direct democracy. So I'll let David tell you a little bit more about that himself. Next, we have Steve Harrelson, who you all know because Steve has been with us a number of weeks here. Steve is also a practicing attorney here in Arkansas, but his practice includes Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee. He practices throughout that 5-state region in both state and federal courts. Steve served in the Arkansas House of Representatives from 2004 until 2010, where he was the majority leader for 2 terms. We had a majority, right? And chaired the House Judiciary Committee. He also served in the Arkansas Senate from 2010 to 2012, where he also served in the Senate Judiciary Committee. While Steve enjoys many areas of the legal arena, his passion is preparing for and engaging in trial by jury. He believes in the constitutional right to trial by jury and is willing to protect and preserve that concept. That today, Steve is also a member of the Election Commission here in Pulaski County. So he began that role in January.
That's right.
Yeah, January of this year. So he's going to make sure our elections are safe and sound. He received his undergraduate degree from the University of Arkansas and his law degree from the Bowen School of Law right here in Little Rock. Right, Trina's going there right now. So he also earned a certificate from Harvard's University's John F. Kennedy School of Government in 2008 for executives in state and local government, and a certificate of comparative law from Oxford University. So thank you, Steve. Welcome. And then last but not least, we have JP Tribell, who usually sits over there. So most of you know him as well. After a 2-decade stint studying and working in 4 different countries across Europe, picking up languages in each of them, Russian will be the one that you use most frequently going forward. JP decided to move back to native Little Rock for a change of course. while single parenting. He studied law and has begun practicing since 2017. His practice focuses on their passion as an advocate for the underdog, sometimes literally through representation in adoptions, sometimes standing up for the voter, for the LGBT community, and for children by drafting laws and advocating for their passage in the legislature and fighting bad bills. Sometimes through drafting and promoting ballot initiatives to strengthen the voices of the people, improve education, and ensure that issues affecting the little guy become part of our political conversation. In their free time, JP enjoys catching up with friends, reading, being outdoors, traveling, cooking, and he sits on the board of nonprofit organizations in Little Rock. So thank you. And then one last person to introduce, helping me no, I don't introduce you, no, you're not gonna help. Helping me to moderate this conversation is Kevin Azanza, who you also met, many of you did before. He's the Community Engagement Director for the ACLU of Arkansas. And before that, he worked at the Northwest Arkansas Food Bank as the Agency Relations Manager. And he's just like an all-around good guy, right? Just an all-around, just good person. Kevin, I want to read this part though. Kevin is a first-generation graduate from the University of Arkansas. Woo, pig! Come on. Graduating with 2 bachelor's degrees in communications and political science. And he is also a proud DACA recipient and immigrant. So with that being said, I'm gonna just ask you all, why are you here? Like when I called you, when I emailed you, when I asked you to speak, what was it that you thought would be interesting and that you wanted to share with this amazing group of individuals?
Well, for me, I think I can provide some experience, even though it's sort of antiquated now because I was in the legislature. But I want you to remember that was 12 to 20 years ago when I was there. Things have really, really changed. Back then, there was zero partisanship. But the one thing that I think convey to people is that one of the roles the judiciary can do to keep the legislature in check is to determine whether or not acts that have been passed and signed into law are actually constitutional. Sometimes they're blatantly unconstitutional. And people like David will remind people that, hey, you're about to pass something that may bring you into court. But the perspective I can bring is a lot of times legislators sort of wore that as a badge of honor. And I would be sitting with them in committee or after committee or before committee or whatever else saying, well, this is going to cost the taxpayers if you get sued over this. They didn't care. They wore it as a badge of honor, and they thought that was the thing to do to allow the judiciary to overrule their act or their bill as unconstitutional. And so that's just something I never really understood from some legislators. But it was a fact of life, at least when I was there. And I'm sure, I know it still is.
It's worse,
Yeah.
much worse.
Yeah.
Thank you. JP, you want to go?
Well, yeah, I guess I can piggyback off of Steve's comments. The judiciary is of the utmost importance now because it's really the last safeguard we have. And in reality, in the lawmaking system, it is the last safeguard. I was testifying against a bill this morning where the legislature is trying to pass this bill that says a court may not find the law unconstitutional, which is blatant violation of the separation of powers. And
say that again. What did they want to do?
There's a clause in the bill that says a court may not find the law in the bill unconstitutional.
What? Have they ever heard of the supremacy clause?
Apparently not. I mean,
Wait, I have it right here.
and pardon my cynicism, but I think to Steve's point, things have gotten a lot worse. And, I was talking to somebody today asking, did the BLR even review these things for constitutionality anymore? Because the legislature is trying to get bills passed that will go to court, that will challenge constitutionality, because I think nationwide they're trying to limit the Constitution certainly as much as they can. and they're using legislation to do that. But we're seeing a whole lot of that, and that's, you know, my observation is you link everything together. I'm seeing this commonly done. I mean, in the same bill, there's a clause that applies, this is the most un-American thing I've ever heard in my life, but they're trying to say if a person is acting according to the law today, and there's a 20-year statute of limitations to bring a cause of action. If, for example, in 19 years from now, the law today is overturned or repealed, then they can sue. Let's say if I'm a lawyer representing a client based on the law today, but my actions today in 19 years become illegal, they can sue me in 20 years according to what the law is then, not what it is today. And I've never heard anything so unconstitutional, so un-American. But these are the kind of things that they're trying to get passed. So we need the judiciary. We need the judiciary to be there, and we really, really need the judiciary to fall in line and step up, which concerns me recently, but they've got to start putting some guardrails on the system, otherwise we're in trouble. You want to comment on that?
I'm good.
Why am I here? Wow.
Why are you here, David? Why did
You asked.
That's what I was thinking.
Number one, why am I here? It's horrible what they're doing at our General Assembly. It's horrible what's going on in Washington, and it's really impacting adversely the lives of people in this state and across the country, especially, people from a marginalized class that really don't have a voice to do that. So, first thing, and why am I here is because, they're doing that, and it's horrible and it's sad, and we're gonna fix it. We cannot rest until we fix it. And we're one of the states that has direct democracy. We have the ability to do a constitutional amendment. We have the ability to do initiated act, and we have referendum. And they're making that process much harder. And to me, the harder they try to make it, the better I feel about the judiciary in one respect. Several years ago, I had a case in Manhattan, and one of the companies went into bankruptcy, and we were in front of the Kings County in Brooklyn, and there was Steve may remember, his old Ivor Johnson arm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so the court there was wanting to proceed with this case, even though the bankruptcy court had stated. We had a little lawyer that was there, and he was big of voice, small of stature, and he kept jumping up and down and reminding the judge that Kings County in Brooklyn was still part of the United States of America, and the federal court trumped him. So we have the federal court. Like JP says, I have no faith in the Arkansas Supreme Court. I think intellectually, I don't even know how they sleep at night with some of the decisions that they make. And I don't mind if you tell them that.
They need to be told.
Yeah, right. And it's not going to change them either. But we have the federal courts in Arkansas, and while there is no United States constitutional right to the initiative referendum, what the United States Supreme Court has says is that if a state gives you this right, then the United States Constitution protects that right for you. So basically, the initiative and referendum process in Arkansas is free speech, subject to strict scrutiny because it is core political speech. So I would reckon that someday, relatively soon, there's going to be litigation filed in the United States District Court to declare that the laws that they're making now are unconstitutional, because I think clearly that they are. And second of all, in 2012 was the first time, it wasn't the first time I did an issue referendum. That was in the mid-90s. But we were sitting on Nate Coulter's porch, the library's right here. Brent Bumpers and a bunch of guys. And, that was when the Little Rock, God, what were those things called? The encampments. Occupy Little Rock, yeah, it was going on. And Bettina Brownstein and John had written the ethics amendment, and we were sitting around the porch and we thought, well, this is a great idea. We'll just go out and do this, let's give us something to do. Politics are changing, we wanted to do something, and it was a lot more difficult than we thought. We failed miserably in getting that on the ballot. But I met Melissa at the time as we started doing the medical marijuana. I thought at the time, just a bunch of hippies wanting to smoke weed. I don't give a shit. They fine with me. Throughout the process, I found out it's really, really, really an important thing to have. It really does have a lot of medicinal benefits. And then my former law partner, Sheffield Nelson, was trying to take on the Stevenses with the fracking tax. There were a couple of casino things going on. And then in 2012, during that cycle, the petitioning was the Wild West. It was bad. It was, it was fraudulent. They were complaining now about somebody signing an agreement 4 or 5 times or a petition for profit. There were people back there that signed it like 37, 38 times. God. And Martha Adcock was the election director then, and she was, we disagreed politically, but she believed in this process as well. And she didn't feel like she could do that. So in 2012, I took this giant box of all these fraudulent petitions to the Larry Jegley, the prosecuting attorney. I said, you need to prosecute these people, or the General Assembly is going to use this mess up to take away our right. Well, he didn't prosecute them. And in 2013, they did pass all of the original restrictions on canvassing. Me and Bettina sued, represented Paul Spencer and ACLU and Neil Seeley. And some of them got stricken, but we lived with the rest of them. And you know what? I told Neil from the Democrat Gazette the other day, since then, it's been a clean process. I mean, that's where we got the 75% rule. Keith Ingram, good Democrat, referred that constitutional amendment out and says you have to have 75%. That's because one of those casino things in Woodruff County, they were short. They needed their 15 counties, and they just sat down and started writing Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse and set those signatures in. And there was no do not count provisions at the time. And so so we got those rules and they're good now. But so I think that all of those rules will be declared unconstitutional. We're in the same circuit as South Dakota and North Dakota. This goes back to the progressive movement. It was in the 1910s and the 1900s, the Farmers Union. Williams Jennings Bryan came to Arkansas, got on the back of a train. Governor Cherry had Donahue had the General Assembly refer this constitutional amendment out, and it passed. Supreme Court tried to set it aside. But so we've had it since then. And I'm really rambling, but
Well, thanks.
so but anyhow, but we have this process, and we're going to protect it. And what I was going to say is that some of this paid canvassers statutes, they were the same in South Dakota, and the 8th Circuit has already said they're unconstitutional. So, that's going to be count number 1 of our complaint. When we get it, we're going to clean all these up, and we're going to protect the process, and we're going to put some amendments on this time that we'll get on, and they'll be mad and they'll pass, and we'll just keep them in line. So, I know that there are a lot of people hurting. Just don't give up hope. We got it.
Thanks, David. Sarah, what can you add to that conversation? Constitutionality, that should be your thing, right?
Yeah, honestly, I'm here because I couldn't get the introverts in our legal department to come do that. But no, part of why, I like talking about all this stuff. That's why I have this job, but I also like to have the opportunity to kind of strike the balance. I think a lot of people have relied on not just the ACLU, but other lawyers who do this good work to fix whatever the legislature does. And we've had some pretty good success at that. At the same time, courts are getting, I mean, we already had Trump 1.0 and he messed up a whole lot of courts in the process, and it's getting harder and harder to get good decisions in federal court. As David noted, it's nearly impossible in state court, but so we really do have to fight on all fronts. We have to fight at the legislature and we have to continue fighting in court. Yeah, I like to say I gave up on the courts and decided I'd stick with the Arkansas Legislature, which probably makes me crazy, but here we are. Yeah.
There's some wisdom in that.
Yeah, thank you guys for all that input. One question that was brought up to me was thinking about your guys' experience, how have you seen the barriers change in the last couple decades, and how do you expect that to be what moves the work forward? Not everyone at once now, come on now.
Well, I'll tell you, I kind of talked about it earlier, up until 2013, when the General Assembly met, you know, we pretty much had the original, you know, initiative and referendum process that was put in our Constitution in 1910. You know, actually it came out of Switzerland because they had a horrible thing, and so the Progressive Party went over there and studied it, and so that's the origination of the INRs. You know, they were trying to do crazy things as the Progressive Party, you know, like they want to give women the right to vote. They wanted to do all kinds of, you know, things like that. And they were concerned that one, the General Assembly was not going to do it. How do we get it done? Number two, if they do, so that's the initiative, and they're going to pass these horrible laws. How do we keep that in check? And that's the referendum. And that was the, you know, the first line of our constitutional amendment is that we give the power to the General Assembly, but we reserve this to ourselves to hold you guys in check. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's it. Yeah.
You know, to follow up on that, I've been able to see it from both sides because I've been involved in movements where an initiated act was something that was desired. And so you would try to lobby the legislature to say, hey, this is what we want. If you can pass something similar to our satisfaction, we won't have to go do all this work and get all the signatures and so forth. Then I was able to see it from the legislature because, you know, the legislature can refer out up to 3 constitutional amendments. And then they understand that there are other movements out there who are going to be dealing with some populist type issues that may find themselves on the ballot. And so I've seen the legislature try to lobby with the initiated act folks like David, or say, hey, how can we do this where, you know, we could pass something or refer it out to the people ourselves that may be somewhat satisfactory to you or your group or whatever else. And so that was something that I found interesting when I was in the legislature, because we all knew that one of the, and I think this is an important part of Arkansas politics, is that we do have this direct democracy right here currently. And so long as we keep that alive, that somewhat can keep the legislature in check themselves, because they know that the people have the right to go, if they can gather enough signatures and get something on the ballot, they can get it passed. And so repealing an initiated act or an initiated or a constitutional amendment, those things are a lot different. And so it's extremely difficult to do. And so I think it's important to keep that as a part of Arkansas politics.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, because that's a great example. I told you we failed miserably in 2012 in collecting the signatures on the ethics amendment. And so the General Assembly, you know, came into session in January of 2013, and we had refiled our petitions and got our ballot titles, and we went out to the state capitol with cameras in tow and went up to every member of the General Assembly with that camera, like, will you sign this? Will you sign this? And it wasn't, you know, probably with less than a few days before John Woods and Warwick Saban were calling me, like, is there some way we can work it out, Lamoureux? Is there some way we can work this out where y'all don't do this? And so, you know, we sat down together and we got the ethics reforms that we kind of wanted, and we gave a little bit like that. But in addition to that, we which I thought was a good idea at the time. I still do. We loosened up term limits. Term limits were horrible back then. You had 3 terms and 2 terms. That's where the overall 16-year term came from. In addition to that, we did away with, Steve will remember this, they had like office allowances and all kinds of stuff like that. So we stole from Oregon the idea for the Citizens Commission to set wages for the members of the General Assembly and the constitutional officers. And they set those at a fair amount at that time, and maybe more than what a lot of people think it should be, but they're not getting the money under the table anymore because we stopped that.
Yeah.
So he's right, it was their fear that they were gonna get hammered by this. I can't take a pencil from anybody and I'm going to jail. And it was that harsh. And so we did end up with that thing, and they referred it out. We all supported it. The term limit, people hated it. They drug their Trojan horse all around the state. But, we won. And so you're right, out of that, and that's why I like these little crowds. Out of that little bitty Occupy Little Rock encampment came this idea that somehow made it to Nate Coulter's porch, that made it to an attempt to get on the ballot, that we now have a constitutional amendment that did some wonderful things. So it's a butterfly.
Yeah, absolutely. Do y'all have any questions? If you put it down? I mean, feel free if you do.
I do. When we were in session today in the state agencies meeting, Senator Dodson said that they have legislation now that enables them to change, the legislature can change a constitutional amendment.
Where are you going with that?
Okay, answer the question.
So the answer to that question is, so our initiative and referendum, yes.
I just don't have enough background information. What is the
Idiot
question?
split. The General Assembly believes that they have the right to change an initiated constitutional amendment that passed the voters with a 2/3 vote. That's the issue. Our Amendment 7 is poorly drafted. It says that the General Assembly has the right to amend any measure by a 2/3 vote, and it defines measure as an initiated act and a constitutional amendment. In the 1951, that was challenged in the Supreme Court in a decision called the Arkansas Game and Fish versus Edgemont. And in that case, the Supreme Court says, well, it says that, but it doesn't really mean that. Because, why would anybody do this 10% instead of 8% thing? Why would you go through all these other hurdles to do that? And it just doesn't make sense to do that. And so since 1951, the Supreme Court has interpreted our amendment to say that they cannot have the ability to change an initiated constitutional amendment with the 2/3 vote. Currently, where we are on that, they tried to, last legislative session, they tried to be sneaky and run a constitutional amendment to amend the highway amendment. So, the highway funding amendment that talks about, you had the decision, the Supreme Court said 4-lane highways means 4-lane highways and nothing more than that. So Mark Johnson, surely concerned about our roads and not this at all, filed a constitutional proposed an act to change that 4-lane to any lane highway. And thankfully, we knew what he was up to and it got killed in committee. But if you go back and pull that bill up, you can see this whole argument in here, what they're trying to make. What makes it really important now is that the marijuana industry sued the state over some amendments that they made to the medical marijuana amendment. When I drafted the medical marijuana amendment, I gave them the ability to change some things and limit some things, and they changed some things they shouldn't have changed. And so Chip Welch said no. That doesn't mean that. He relied on the Edgemont decision. And so what's happened now is the Attorney General has appealed that decision of Judge Welch to the Supreme Court. So there's a case sitting on the Supreme Court's docket now where this issue is teed squarely up. And I think I know how they're gonna rule. Because when they took the medical marijuana amendment off this last cycle for the bad ballot title, one of the issues that they raised in there is because I was trying to be sneaky. In the medical marijuana amendment, you know, I put a provision in there that says the General Assembly can't change any initiated constitutional amendment. And that was in the ballot title too. So it was disclosed, but so they found another reason to throw, I think that's why they threw that off. And so in that decision, they talk about that and they pretty much foreshadowed what they're going to decide. So hopefully they don't decide it. I hope the politics of the Supreme Court has got them mucked up. So I hope they don't decide that issue until this General Assembly is gone, because if they decide it between now, the floodgates are gonna open. So that's a problem, which brings us to, if you want to talk about the new initiated constitutional amendment we just filed, we can move that some more time, but we've got a fix for that. It's a chess match.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say that's part of a broader strategy, which is they're trying to change case law.
Oh, yeah.
Through legislation, and because they know or hope that the courts have changed so much that they might overturn,
Who would have thought they would overturn Roe v. Wade? Seriously, I mean, this is a minor thing
Yeah.
compared to that.
Yeah, and so, yeah, they're hoping to overturn that decision, and they're, today's bill, I know JP and I probably keep talking about it, but it's like reading a legal brief. They're not just writing law, they're making legal arguments about why this law is okay. They're setting it up to be challenged. And then the other thing they're doing is writing bills that are extremely difficult, if not impossible, to challenge in court. Because in Arkansas, we have sovereign immunity. You can't sue the state in court. You have to sue the agency or individual responsible for enforcing the law that you're challenging. So, for example, the bill today that would have allowed private citizens, a parent or a minor, to sue anyone who helps them socially transition. So we're talking about trans kids again. If you use someone's correct pronoun and they're a teenager, they or their parents can then sue you for doing so. And so they have tried to ban gender affirming care, and that got overturned. So what they're doing with this is making it a private cause of action. So there's no one to sue to challenge this law. I don't know if that, they're doing that in a lot more than just this area, but yeah.
I'd like to chime in on that note to build on that. That notion, I believe, came out of Texas, where with the issue of abortion, where they're creating these private causes of action. Normally in court, you have to have direct harm to have standing to sue. But what they're trying to do in legislation is put these mechanisms in which is not necessarily what's going on in that bill, but they're trying to put mechanisms in where, for example, anybody can sue. For example, if I don't believe in abortion and a person over there has an abortion, that's a harm to me. They're stretching a lot of these legal principles to allow people to attack the system, which to me is shifting the separation of powers. I think that's my view, is that looking at it from the sky, they're really trying to influence the separation of powers, which we're seeing in that bill, where they're attempting to greatly restrict how the judiciary can act. And I see that in legislation on ballot initiatives as well. I think they're trying to hamstring the Supreme Court of Arkansas, which is in shambles right now as well politically. There's a lot of infighting going on in the court. I don't know if you guys have heard, but like the month of January, there was not one substantive opinion that was published by the court. It was all infighting. So they're playing on all of that and trying to create, I think, really strong supremacy of the General Assembly. A very quick point on that, before I pass the mic, so to speak, is our Constitution of 1874 was a reaction against a very strong executive. It pretty much decapitated the governor's office by putting an immense amount of power in the legislature. And I think they're trying to consolidate even more, but taking it from the judiciary.
Yeah, the prime example of that is the bill that gave the Attorney General the power to decide to not write a ballot title on a measure if he believes that it violates federal law or the federal Constitution. So basically, that it violates the law. I'm not gonna write a ballot title, so I can't wait till I'm gonna run the marijuana up against him real soon just to get a reaction out of him.
Yet the Supreme,
Single one, marijuana is legal, period.
Yet the Supreme Court, I think it was in the case where they struck down the ballot title on the marijuana amendment this last session, said they don't give a damn what the Attorney General thinks.
That is true.
Well, David, at least
Neither do I.
if you did a ballot initiative that said marijuana is legal, period, at least that would be at an 8th grade reading level.
I'm not sure though.
Oh,
Because the first thing I did on the 8th grade reading level, and y'all will love this, I went back and pulled the marriage amendment. Did you do the same thing? I did the marriage amendment, I did the single parent adoption act, and I did the I call it the abortion amendment that they did. I ran those through there and they were like way over the 8th grade level.
No, I mean,
And I'm like, that's because no Republican reads over that level.
During that committee meeting, I've never heard so many legislators say, well, I just put that into ChatGPT.
well, in one of them,
They were running things as they were going. It's-
one of them ran the phrase, an amendment to the Constitution of Arkansas, and that was what, at 12.2, it was like college level. So you can't even get the title, that, it's not even the title, but the heading, if you will. You can't even get that down to an 8th grade reading level. It was absurd.
So a lot of you aren't like in this day-to-day grind of what all these laws that are happening right now. But the one thing that I think you might all be interested in is that the direct democracy bill that we talked about last week, or whenever that was, so much about how they're structured and how they're based in the Arkansas Constitution. We talked about, Kristen explained to us that there are 2 different ways an amendment can be made. One is through the legislature can propose an amendment to the Constitution. And then the second is by the private or the public's initiative process. But one of the things that I find really interesting right now is that those are being handled as if they were entirely different processes and have different rules that are assigned to them. So I'm curious, in your legal opinions, is that fair, right, and just? And is it defensible that, for an example, the 8th grade reading level, that's a bill that is being proposed that would say that any initiative that is suggested by the people would have to have an 8th grade reading level, but if it's suggested by the legislature, it doesn't have to have that same requirement. So how does that square legally, and is that something that you see continuing? Is it plausible?
Hell no, it doesn't square.
They don't care if it squares or not. That's the point.
Yeah.
I think they lay in bed at night trying to think of crazy things to do. And keep a notebook by their bedside table and they, oh, this is a great idea. I had this great dream. This is how I can screw the people some more. And they write it down and then they give it to BLR to do it, or they get, y'all know what, I don't know if you know what ALEC is. I'm sure you know what ALEC is. I'm sure they get an email from ALEC that says, hey, this is the way you do something here. And it's just, that's an Republican think tank. Maybe, I don't know if they think above the 8th grade level again. But anyhow, they come up with all these laws. I mean, so what we're seeing in Arkansas, that we're seeing in Ohio, we're seeing in North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Missouri, Oklahoma, that this is the pocket of states here in the middle that have, direct democracy. We're not seeing it in Massachusetts or California. Florida's getting hammered real hard, but they can only do constitutional amendments. They can't do initiated act, so they can't do referendum. And their constitutional amendment has to pass with a 60% vote. You know, they tried to do that here 2 years ago.
So David,
Yes, sir.
if I understood correctly, you think a lot of these or all of these restrictions will get overturned or?
I do. Yeah.
You're pretty confident in that?
I do. Yeah. I mean, you look at them individually and they're all suspect, but then you look at them as a process, as a total process, you can't do anything.
What
if
the
you have no
canvassers have to do.
Yeah, what the canvassers have to do, the restrictions that they go by, the penalty, I mean, and that's what they're designed to do. I mean,
Yeah,
and they're not shy about it. So,
That's
you know,
what's shocking.
So this
Well-
program, that we've been doing has been really centered on the idea that we all have opportunities to interact with the system, but we're not taught what they are. We're not trained on how to use those avenues that exist. And I think when it comes to the judicial system, that would be the one that would seem like, not only do we have to just sit back and wait for the legislature, but we have to sit and wait for you guys to do something. Is there a way that everyday folks are part of your process, part of the solution when it comes to using the judiciary? And how would that work? How would that happen?
It might depend on the case, but I think with most of our cases, we, and this is partly because we only do, the ACLU only does impact litigation, generally speaking. So we're looking to take cases that impact a lot of people, all of Arkansas, or all trans people in Arkansas, or all women, or, and so a huge part of that is the public messaging piece, and so there's storytelling involved. So we often do a lot of that public advocacy alongside the lawsuit, and include people that aren't necessarily our clients. And then just showing up in court sometimes too. Sometimes it's to support the people that are bringing the case, and sometimes it's to show the judge or the public or the media or whatever that people care about this. And it doesn't necessarily influence the outcome. Like it really shouldn't probably influence the outcome, but you know, it does make a difference to a judge to see human kids and their parents and the effect that this has had on them. And
I agree with that, but I also think that, like you say, this would probably be the branch of government that should and would be impacted the least by public advocacy. But I mean, there's a reason why things are starting to, it feels like, at least to me, the polling obviously doesn't back that up from what I read yesterday, but I think things are starting to move. I mean, there's a town hall tonight, and we're probably suffering from that because there would be people here, except they're there.
And supposedly the senators are at the Capitol Hotel, or they were at 4.
Yeah.
there were 500 people in front of the VA hospital in Fayetteville this weekend.
Yeah, but I also think that judges are human beings too, and so they're going to see how this could impact the public, and so I do think that public participation is helpful in these. I just think that it's probably less than it is elsewhere.
Agreed.
Are judges elected? Judges are elected.
Yes.
Right?
Elected
Well,
state
state, not
Yeah,
federal.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, that's kind of another thread out there is trying to increasingly politicize.
Yeah.
Well,
the judiciary, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you wanna-
Partisan.
I mean, in the state and nationally.
Yeah.
Is that a true or real thing, or?
they're trying to make judicial elections partisan. There is a solution.
Now, we had that up until what, 2000? And that went away with Amendment 80, I think it was. But yeah, here it comes again.
David, what's your thought? How can people get involved? How should they get involved? And does it matter?
Of course it matters. You know, I think whatever you can do as an individual, whether it's talking to your neighbor or coming to meetings or sending an email, all these threads of communication that weave us all together into this big blanket that makes our state great. I mean, I can tell you, I've done so much polling in this state. That General Assembly is not reflective of the people of this state. They're just not. I mean, even the people who attend church regularly, if you want to put them in that category, is not reflective. It's unfortunately that we have the lowest number of people registered to vote in the country. And there's a reason for that. And we have one of the lowest participation of voters in the country, and there's a reason for that. So, voting reform is a key, but just making sure your neighbor votes and making sure that your friends are registered to vote and actually do vote, and because it's going to take a long time. I mean, we didn't have a Republican at all until 2010, and then and now it's that. But they started out at the school boards. They started out at the, they had a plan. They started out at the city hall. So run for garden club, do something, then go to city hall, and then something go, because that's how it's a tough. It's going to be a long road, but at some point in time, and I think Steve mentioned it, they have gone so far that even people who are not really politically inclined or motivated are getting to be to the point where they're so offended it's what's going on, that it might be a quicker fix than I thought it was. I mean, it's like, I grew up in Newport. It's farmers, and all of a sudden, they voted for Trump. Now they're like, wait a minute. I voted, you didn't say you were going to cut my subsidies. And I'm like, oh, hell yeah, you did. You just didn't listen. So,
Well, let me ask you this question. One of the things that I have been very concerned about, right, is with as much that is happening on the federal level. Like, for example, in November, when the elections were happening, we saw the federal messaging that Arkansans' votes didn't matter, that the decision was already made, that there was no reason to participate because the electoral college votes wouldn't happen, directly impact voter turnout, because people were like, well, then if it doesn't matter if I vote at the presidential level, what does the rest of it matter as well? Tonight, we have this big town hall going on. We have 200 people, right, who are going to go and talk to each other because there's no one there who can do anything for them because nobody showed up. But yet there's all this commotion at the federal level, and we have 20 of us here talking about the state of Arkansas. In your experience and just with your broad perspectives, how do we get people to focus and pay attention to what's happening in Arkansas so that we can do those things like start people at school boards and move them on up, et cetera? I mean, to me, it seems like there's a big messaging problem in that people are so caught up in the federal stuff that they're not paying any attention here. And I think it's part of the problem. I'm just kind of curious what your reaction is and if you have any ideas.
Man, I don't know. I was 4 years old and my dad took me to the damn dedication to Heber Springs and to see John F. Kennedy. I don't remember it, but there's photographs of, and my dad went to Harding. I mean, I'm fixing to say, it's us. We have to do it. I mean, it's our friend, our neighbor,
So can direct democracy help? Can ballot initiatives help us build?
It's the answer.
You
I mean, it's the answer.
It's the key, yeah.
I mean, we would be in a different state right now, but the Supreme Court took it off the ballot. In 2020, we qualified 2 initiatives for the ballot. One was the Independent Redistricting Commission. So we would not be as gerrymandered as we exist now. And we actually had the ranked choice voting, top 4 on the ballot. So what happens, everybody ran in a single primary and the top 4 vote getters advanced to the general and you ranked them 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't tell me that we can't rank people in Arkansas because everybody knows the hogs are number 1 and technically. So
We know ranking.
we know rankings, you know, it's just nothing more difficult than football or basketball. But we got that on the ballot, but you know, Senator Cotton would have lost. I mean, and think back to our gubernatorial race, you know, if you had, would Leslie have gotten out? Would Tim have gotten out? You had a Republican primary with Sarah. Would Jim Hendren or Davy Carter have run as an independent? I think, yeah. And then you'd have had Chris Jones. So what are you gonna have if you have a general election in November that had Sarah and Leslie? I think Leslie, you know, Tim's out. He should beat him anyhow. And Chris and Davy Carter. And you decided 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's my first choice, but who's my second choice? Well, you know, Chris is gonna get first choice on what do you get, 35%? That's not gonna do. Then you get these moderate Republicans in here. I don't like Sarah, I like Leslie. But what about Davy? You know, he's a good Republican, independent, smart guy. I predict that Davy would have been our governor. Because when you come ranking them 1, 2, 3, 4 and saying that, we'd have done that. And it would have been the same for the General Assembly as well. You know, they talking about our voter thing. It's like you look at the Republican primary is where our elections are decided now. And if you start figuring out exactly how many people in Arkansas actually vote in that primary, it's like 5%. So there's 5% of the people in Arkansas are controlling us. So, you know, that's not a hard number to move. I mean, it's really not when you look at it that way, you know, 10% or 5% make a big difference
You're talking about of Arkansans.
of Arkansans, yeah.
I
mean-
calculated it. I think Sanders was chosen by, I think it was 16% of people who voted.
Yeah,
You bring the population in, you're pulling that number way down.
yeah, and if 60% of the people who are eligible to vote, so she got 9% of the people in
Yeah,
Arkansas who are eligible to voted for her. You know, so it looks bad, but as Bill Clinton said, it's just math. It's just math,
Yeah.
and we just got to look at and I've read a big thing about Donald Trump. How did he win? And with as little money as he had versus Kamala, is they went and identified those swing districts that they thought would flip those electoral college states, everything, and that's where they did, and they won that, and they won those little bitty margins, and then they won the electoral college. I mean, so we have got to be smarter at this.
Sophia, did you have a question?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. I'm interested because I hear you guys talking about a bunch of different divisions. One is capacity, right? And sort of general intelligence of the elected officials, literacy levels. One is partisanship. And one is a sense of like, there has always been, even when they were Democrats, a group of people who were like, it is a badge of honor to be overturned by the Supreme Court, right? So these things aren't I mean, when you think about the interplay of these three things, and we're thinking about strategy, who really do you think, I guess, how much of this is about us being happy to talk about particular parties and blame it on partisanship, and how much of it is about maybe other factors that are at play, and how does that affect our strategy?
You know, one of the things that I was just saying earlier about the lack of partisanship 10 years ago, that's obviously definitely changed. But I still think the divisions are fairly similar to what they were when I was there. And it wasn't partisanship. There were a whole lot of regionalism divisions. You had the Northwest Arkansas clique, who would all vote together. You had Central Arkansas, you had the Delta. And so I really do think that regionalism drives a whole lot of issues in Arkansas, and probably always will. And at least when I was there, I think it's probably still the case, where a lot of times regionalism goes deeper than partisanship. And you'll find people from different sides of the aisle in Northwest Arkansas voting on the same side, whereas, you know, people in Central and Eastern Arkansas may be on the other side. It doesn't have anything to do with politics. And I think a lot of that is just because of the diverse geography we have here, you know, with the Central Arkansas and the River Valley and Ozarks and et cetera.
So you don't think it's purely partisan and supermajority? You think there are these wedge sort of identities that can help?
Absolutely, and now I know that's changed since I've been there because there's just a whole lot of partisanship, but back then we'd make Republicans chairman of committees. And now if you're a Democrat, you probably don't even have a parking spot. But I absolutely believe that, and that, there are, I think, I would say there are a lot of things that probably rate above partisanship in Arkansas politics. Although I think it's back with a vengeance, particularly with this governor. And I think it is a driving force, but probably not the biggest one.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in a little bit on that and also say I was at a conference last summer on, it was called a judicial ethics conference, but it really was dealing more with the overall system. And one thing that was made abundantly clear is we don't do enough on the state level, which is what we're talking about here and now. And I've attended another conference after the election that was talking about a similar issue, that there is a lot more power on the state level than people give credit for. And I think the answer to the question, what can we all do? It's spreading the word, it's being involved from every aspect of the system, whether it's ballot initiatives, whether it's speaking at the legislature, whether it's going to court hearings, whether it's bringing, I think really the key is bringing PR to whatever event is going on, raising public awareness. I think that is a huge issue, is making the people of Arkansas aware of what's going on. For example, Clark Tucker said in a committee hearing in the last session, there was one of the anti-trans bills that was being run, and he threw out the comment, he said, look, this bill, it was regarding trans children. He said, this bill may affect a couple hundred kids. And we're sitting here spending all this hot air on this while 25,000 Arkansas kids are going home hungry every day. We're not giving them any lip service, but we're worried about these couple of hundred kids. And that's illustrative of the fact that we're not addressing issues, as David said, that affect Arkansas voters. And I don't care what region of Arkansas you're from. I also agree with Steve about the regionalism, but we're not addressing the issues that affect Arkansas voters, and we've got to raise awareness of that.
I'm gonna agree with Steve even more and go ahead and answer. I won't lose my thought.
Question is that, okay, so if we need to give the information to the constituency of Arkansas, how do we do that with limited access to credible media? There is a reduction in hometown newspapers. There is actually a reduction in communication across the state and even across the nation. We're getting so much, as Trump would call, fake news. You don't know what real news is, and we don't know how to get it to the everyday layperson who is, how do we address that? How do we get the information to everyday Tom and Jane? How do we do that with limited media, with some people don't have internet access? We don't have, Arkansas Democrat Gazette, you can get a tablet. Some people might have a tablet, don't know how to use it, or don't have internet.
We're gonna pay $35 a month.
Yeah, right.
New York Times description is $4.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'll tell you one way. Here's a good example in my email today. There's this Senate bill 456 that discusses how the zoning can affect different neighborhoods in Arkansas. And there was basically a bill that gutted all the historic preservation groups and said, you can't do zoning anymore. All the capital zoning gone. Well, anyway, the Preserve Arkansas and several people just went on Facebook or Instagram or any of these social media sites and just said, go read this. And as a result of that, the sponsor of this bill, Senator Jim Petty, has promised an amendment. So I really do think social media can be harnessed in ways that just didn't exist 25 years ago. And you know, the one way to put pressure on a legislator is to make them think, hey, I may get beat over this, or I may draw an opponent and have to go raise money. And really, that's the only way you're ever going to get anybody's attention in the legislature. And I think Facebook, social media is one way to do that.
We have a big lobbyist like the municipal league.
Yeah,
But I agree with you. Like I said, I grew up in Newport and my mother wrote a column for the Newport Daily Independent. It was a daily newspaper and it came home every day. And now it's a weekly and it's published in Jonesboro and they truck it over and I'm not even sure who writes the article for it, but you've lost that hometown feel and we need to somehow find some sort of organization that I did the FOI amendment and act this last time around with the Press Association, and this was just a very big conversation that we had in all of our meetings then about how do you protect and preserve the local newspapers and stuff. So that's big. And again, I'm going to make about Steve and regionalism. That's true, but the biggest buzzword that seems to be the killer, and it killed me in 2014 and it took my client's casino away this last election, is local control.
Oh, yeah.
You throw local control out there and we in 2014 we tried to turn the state wet and we didn't have enough money to really run a good campaign, and the county line liquor stores did it, but their whole thing was local control. I mean, we had got the petitions to get Saline County wet at the time, and Saline County voted like 60% to turn their county wet, but voted 60% against turning everybody else's county wet, all on that local control. And the same thing happened this time around on the casino amendment where they took away the casino in Polk County. Let the people in Polk County decide. Let the people in Polk County decide. Well, the people in Polk County voted 60% to keep the casino. The state said took it away from them because they want the people in Polk County to decide. I mean, great marketing scheme by them. I have to give them credit, but so yeah, local control. So, but yeah, that's how they manipulate all of our feelings in Arkansas. They convince the people in Newport or Mena that your lifestyle is under attack. That's it.
Yeah.
And you can't argue that. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say that another one of these divisions really is a division about science, elitism, knowledge, news from someplace else. When you're talking about the local, which is usually not respecting expertise, knowledge, and it's more like we can make it up. It's like in education, we don't need educated people to do this. We ourselves can make up what we want our kids to do. And that drives a big wedge. I went to talk on the maybe a Olivia thing, and I'm from the Med Center. I'm a retired librarian. I didn't even say I was from the Med Center because I already knew what they think about the Med Center.
Yeah.
I didn't say it. I said head of a medical library. God knows where. I didn't say it because I heard them say things like, he said, we have our own doctors. We don't care about those people from the Med Center who were speaking. They didn't care about the National American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. They just blow that away. And so that it is more of a, we can just make it up ourselves.
Yeah.
We don't need to have.
Well, we saw that today, Sarah.
the same, yeah, I mean, it's the same bill sponsor that we were dealing
Oh,
with today.
okay, uh-huh.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, today, there was a supposed mental health specialist who was spewing, what was it, 80% of trans children detransition or something?
Yeah.
When
Just
it's
completely false.
maybe not even 2%.
Mhm.
Right.
And the reasons people detransition are usually not because they change their mind, it's more economic or they
Or
lose
because-
medical care or
Or
whatever.
because they're not
Is
being
this the
accepted.
proposed bill about assisting somebody to transition?
Yes,
Is there any chance that that's gonna
It was pulled today for amendment, So-
It's going to be resubmitted.
yeah. But it's impossible. I don't see how they can amend that bill to make it constitutional, so I'm,
Well, the Attorney General's representative basically said
yeah,
the,
did say.
one of the issues with it was, a question to the sponsor was, can you define what speech within the bill is protected by the First Amendment and what is not, because there was a carve out for the First Amendment. The answer is it's all protected, and the Attorney General's representative came in and said essentially they can't defend it as all protected. After she had said that she got the approval by the AG's office. But again, my point was, here you have this filter, as you said, of we don't want information, we don't want statistics, we want to use what we've got, and we don't want to listen to anything else.
They rattled off a name of physicians they talked to. I knew many of those physicians had nothing to do with this topic at all.
Right,
Yes.
You know, it was like,
it's a strategy.
yeah,
Well, I think this goes along with, I'm sorry, what was your name? No, I think this goes along with what you were asking before, which is that, like, how do we get to people in community? I think that, I don't think we're gonna get as far as we want to get ever unless we get a handle on grassroots community
Yeah,
involvement. And I think some of it's like this, we
Oh,
start with
absolutely,
little things like this. But we've gotta stop trying to rely on even the Democrat Gazette and New York Times to get people correct information. We've gotta be going to church, and really getting in these small rural communities as much as possible, which is very hard to do. That's why I hired Kevin, so his job is to organize the entire state of Arkansas, but but yeah, I think we have to have these conversations. I like to put in my resume, even though I'm a little embarrassed, that I went to Harding, because people are surprised that someone would go to Harding and then work for the ACLU. But the reason I believe the things I believe today is because people bothered to have these conversations with me, and it made me think more critically. And so, like, if we don't have these conversations, then people aren't going to understand actual facts or ever be challenged to change their mind on
Yeah,
anything.
or if we stay in our own little bubble, like the bubble in this room. Every single one of us has an in on some type of community that the rest of us do not. And if we really harness that power, I mean, just a room like this could make a lot of difference.
Yeah, every person you enlist outside your bubble, as Steve's talking about, if they enlist somebody outside of that common bubble, you're starting to spread.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, exactly.
Justice.
I think I wanna also, piggyback on what you were saying before about information, because I'm like decently good at reading and very well trained, and I can't tell you how difficult it is to follow Arkansas politics. Like, and I'm really trying. Like, I think, especially if you move here from not here. Oh, yeah, for sure. I was just saying, I really think that information dissemination is a real problem. Like, I can't follow what's going on. And I think there's two issues. One of them is the media, and I think that's extremely, I really think we could use like someone in y'all's circle needs to start a Substack. And I will pay you $5 a month. Before I pay other people I won't name, because then everyone will know politics, right? You know, to send me an email that's like, here's what's up. Because we need to just get faster, like, to that information. I personally have tried to keep up with the Arkansas Legislature, and it is exhausting.
Yeah.
And I can't do it and also have a full-time job. And I would also like to note that I looked this up. So I have a colleague that I'm working with on a project who works in Indiana, who's in many ways very similar to this state. In Indiana in 2023, do you know how many bills they approved? 252. I think we did 890. Like, how are citizens supposed to like literally know what the law is? So we just need to, like, I think, work together so that this information can be pulled and disseminated before we can have a conversation. You have to like just know what's up.
Jenna, it's hard for people whose job it is to follow to.
I
to
believe
do
you.
it.
I believe you, right? You know, so it's like we just need collaboration.
This is the problem too with social media and over relying on it. One of the things that I've been hearing from people, because we've been getting frustrated about we had really strong participation at the beginning of session, like lots of people volunteering to go and testify and just line the hallways and all that kind of stuff. And it has very much, trickled down
Yeah.
as the session has gone on. And part of that is just fatigue and it is exhausting and it's hard to keep up with. But also we have this tendency because of social media to try to boil things down to these little tiny parcels that always are bad bill alert, bad bill alert.
Right.
Well, you can't bad bill alert every single bill
Yeah.
and then expect people to pay attention. So I agree with you, it's like a challenge that we have
Yeah.
because we don't have those local newspapers. We don't have people that are able to distill it. It's a big challenge for us. Absolutely.
And it's hard also to know like what bills are actually gonna become something and which ones
Yes.
aren't.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like,
Yes.
this red light bill is manic. Is it gonna
Yeah.
pass or not? Right? You know what I mean?
But they also make their way through in under 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right.
From the
Yeah.
day of filing to the day that it's hitting the governor's desk, it's like 2 weeks or less.
Right.
Which is ridiculous. I mean, most of my experience with the legislature comes from Florida. And it takes just a lot longer. Part of it is just the size of the state, part of it is the corruption, it's just there's more money involved, so there's more people fighting. But yeah, that's really big. But I want to get to your ballot initiative that you're gonna be running. Because I think that is really an important part of the process, demonstrates how the judiciary can be used to fight against it, and also bringing in, I think, some different voices, new voices maybe.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm not surprised that you're where you are with the Harding because you just paid attention when you were growing up. As did I, and as the other oddball, John Brummett as well.
Yes.
And Gwen Moritz. So there's something, that maybe we paid attention in Sunday school. But anyhow, so yeah, the direct democracy amendment that we filed basically does kind of 4 basic things. First of all, we talked about that plugging that hole that may exist with can the General Assembly amend and initiate a constitutional amendment by 2/3 vote. There ought to be so many people that support that, including the trial lawyers, because you know how we kill tort reform,
Yeah.
workers' comp
Yeah,
amendment,
exactly.
initiate a
Yeah.
constitutional amendment,
Yeah.
education amendment. I mean, there's a whole band of people that need to be hopping on to help us with this thing, because if that's the law, there's a lot of special interest groups out there who have initiated constitutional amendments that the General Assembly would just love to tinker with. So that's the first thing it does. The second thing it does is, that we have this horrible problem with the ballot title process. It doesn't exist in our initiative and referendum amendment. It was first enacted in the late 30s, early 40s, and it worked fine. There was a challenge to it, whether or not it was done, and the Supreme Court said no. It's a good process. It helps prevent fraud. It helps prevent, misleading ballot titles. If you look at the actual statute itself, what it's really designed to do is to keep some crafty lawyer from designing an amendment that you vote yes and it really means no. That's the purpose of that, is to, cut out that crap. But starting with, I'm gonna blame Dustin for beginning this, because he really reworked my alcohol amendment a bunch of times in 2014 to try to keep it from getting out. But we got it out. We collected signatures in 30 days, guys. That's what happens when you have Walmart's parking lots. Easy. But Leslie Rutledge took it to a different level. In 2018, we were trying to do some campaign finance reform and she wouldn't approve it. I had the national funders already lined up to do it and we were running late. And I said, why don't we just amend the minimum wage again? because, you know, that we did it in 2014, like, oh, really, again? I'm like, yeah, it'll pass again. We could do it tomorrow and take it to $20 an hour and it would pass Arkansas. I submitted to her that same ballot title we used in 2014, and by golly, she rejected it and turned it down. I mean, it was the same one, and it had been approved by the Supreme Court. And also at the same time, I was working on trying to get her to approve the casino amendment ballot title. She was not approving it either. So I sued her in the Supreme Court, David Couch versus Leslie Rutledge, write this ballot title. And I'd be surprised if the Supreme Court didn't write an order like, you need to write that ballot title. And I called, it was Miss Benefield, Julia. I called Leslie's handler at the time and said, marijuana, casino's next. And so they approved every ballot title at that time, and we got those on, and we passed the minimum wage, and we got the casino amendment passed at the same time. But otherwise, if that hadn't happened, those things would not have been on the ballot. So the Attorney General's using that to stop the process. She didn't want to do it anymore. She got the General Assembly to give it to the Board of Election Commissions, and they denied the marijuana ballot title, and the Supreme Court said that's unconstitutional. Giving them that, I knew that was going to happen because it's going to right back on this process because it was avoided their jurisdiction because they have original jurisdiction to decide these things. So I put this ballot title approval. There used to be a statute, probably maybe when you were in the General Assembly, they enacted it. And it said that you write a ballot title, you give it to the Attorney General, he approves it, you publish it in the newspaper, and people have 45 days to challenge it. And if they don't challenge it during that time period, then you can't challenge it again in the Supreme Court. So a crazy lawyer named Oscar Steele from Fort Smith got an amendment on the ballot that basically eliminated all the taxes. And he went through that beautiful process that was set forth in the statute, collected his signatures, got it on the ballot. Somebody challenged the ballot title, and he's like, I followed the law. You can't do it. Well, the Supreme Court struck that statute down as unconstitutional because it said it invaded our jurisdiction. Right decision, because it did. And so basically what this constitutional amendment does, I stole that process that the General Assembly had already crafted and drafted for themselves, and that the Supreme Court begged, at least Tom Glaze and all the good lawyers, Supreme Court people begged us to put back in the Constitution. So I put that process in this direct democracy amendment. So you send your ballot title to the Attorney General. He has to either approve it or rewrite a ballot title. He can't change anything else about it. He sends it to the Secretary of State, who publishes it in the newspaper for 45 days. If nobody challenges it, nobody can challenge a ballot title again. It's going to be constitutional because it's in the Constitution. So all of these organizations that really want to participate in Arkansas but are so afraid to spend money here because you spend millions of dollars to get something on the ballot and then it's ripped off at the last minute after you collect your signatures, will feel much more comfortable about coming to Arkansas. So that's a great forward-looking thing. So it does that. The other thing that it does is, I hate that, I don't know who has collected petitions, but that notary process sucks. It's horrible. And there's so many rules that you can violate that goes to the new dot count. So in 2020, we sued during COVID, we sued to say in federal court, PK Homes, we need relief from this process because of this. And he entered an order, the 8th Circuit set it aside, but he entered an order that said, why do you need a notary? He says, in Arkansas, a declaration under penalty of perjury signed by an individual is the same as a notary. So in this amendment, I took out the notary and put declaration under penalty of perjury. And so as a canvasser, now you go collect your signatures, you go to walk your neighborhood, you sign your petition. You don't have to go to a notary. You don't have to do anything. Just put it in the mail and mail it to the sponsor. So that one little change just going to really, I think, make the initiative process a lot easier to do. The other thing about Amendment 7 is it doesn't have what we lawyers call as a repealer clause in it. It doesn't have a clause that says any and all laws in conflict with this amendment are void and unconstitutional. And so, you know, what we do have is that the provision in Amendment 7 now says that the General Assembly can make laws to prevent fraud and misleading and to punish forgery, and they can make other laws to facilitate the process. Now, any of these laws they pass, you tell me how that, I know what facilitate means, that does not facilitate at all. Yeah. So, but anyhow, so this has a repealer clause in there, so, you know, it won't be anything you could do in federal court, but, you know, if the Supreme Court decided it legally, then a lot of these laws that do exist are just on their face different from the provisions of the Constitution, so they would be in conflicted with that. The other thing I did, or we did in this amendment is, you know, the General Assembly keeps, Steve mentioned earlier, they have the ability to refer 3 constitutional amendments out every session. It seems like every session they have referred out a constitutional amendment to try to further restrict this process. They did it in 2014, the 75% rule. That's okay. It happened. It snuck out. The last 2 times we beat it down. There's 3 or 4 joint resolutions out there right now to do this. So what this direct democracy amendment says is you can't ever refer any constitutional amendment out to mess with the initiative referendum process. If it's ever going to be changed, people will change it. So that's like kind of like the 5 little highlights of what it does. It did a little bit, make it an easier process, close that little loophole, got us a safe ballot title process, and prevent the General Assembly from meddling with what belongs to the people. So that's what the direct democracy does.
Compared to other states who have some type of direct democracy, initiated action, initiated constitution, how easy is it to get something on the ballot in Arkansas versus those other states?
So the biggest thing that it impacted collecting signatures in Arkansas was the decision to go from pay by signature to pay by hour and to limit it to only residents of the state of Arkansas. And so that's been the biggest impediment. You know, they're doing the same thing to other states, not quite as bad. So I would say, you know, pre what's happening now, it's pretty difficult, you know, in all the other states as well.
Yeah.
But if all of these laws are in effect and constitutional, I don't know how you actually ever do it. I really don't. I mean, I think it's just a death knell for it.
Yeah.
So I mean, so I think that's why even the federal courts will weigh in this and like you just totally eliminated this process from, and you can't do it. And so hopefully, you know, we have these laws. So hopefully, you know, in 2013, when the General Assembly passed all those laws, Mary McGowan stayed all of those laws with an injunction pending a decision of the Supreme Court. You know, they didn't come until after 2014. So we operated under those laws for that cycle. If the federal court will stay a lot of these laws or strike a lot of these laws, we can get this on the ballot. You know, I was responsible for the marijuana this last time, and you know, we only spent like $1.5 million on collecting signatures, but I'm telling you, they were pristine. I mean, the ballot title people hated me. They hated to see me wandering in their office. I'm like, you know, like, no. But we did it. We got them. I mean, we got them. Contrasted to the Choctaws spent $4.5 million collecting their signatures.
Could you talk a little bit about who the BQC is that's going to be running that initiative and what kind of involvement, like folks like this?
Everybody's involved.
And what a BQC is.
Yeah, so when you file an initiative, it's really a campaign finance reporting thing. There's this thing called a BQC, it's a ballot question committee. And it is really the people who the sponsor who's drafted this, supported this, and filed it and responsible to the public to do it. So, yeah, I've been working with the League of Women Voters for a long time. And so it was go time. And so the State League of Women Voters and every individual League of Women Voters chapter, Pulaski County, Faulkner County, Washington County, Benton County, agreed to be the sponsors. And we did that just to get going. Our plan, our hope is once the ballot title is approved, which the deadline is Tuesday to do that, and once it's approved, then our goal and our hope is to just go out and start bringing in all Big Ten, every organization, people that my neighbor works for the ARP and they always wanted to be involved in some of this. I'm like, I got a good one for you, So you have organizations like the AARP, you have the Arkansas Advocates for Children and Family. They've always been that, you have all of these public organizations that will come in and help, even the ACO, Neil, always good to lend his name and his people to help out. And so you have all these organizations and we will just Big Tent this thing. And so I think I hope he approves the ballot title. He probably will not. But what nobody else knows is in like 2024, near the end of the cycle, I submitted this to him then and to get his thoughts on it. And he of course denied my ballot title and did all these complaining about it. And so for 2 years, I've been meandering that in my mind and tweaking with it. So, and now I've sent it in that addressed all of his concerns. So it's like I said, it's a chess game here. We'll see what he's going to do. But so it's due out next Tuesday. And once we get it out, it's a Big Tent. It's everything. I wish somehow, and I'm going to try to do that, all those volunteers who collected signatures on the I call it reproductive health care amendment, on the abortion amendment. Let me tell you that the biggest surprise in my entire career doing this, and the first ones I did was in '94, was how that group of volunteers did what they did. I mean, that is the most incredible thing in the world. And so, bring them all in here. Hell, I don't care if people carry 900 petitions. We'll throw out some. I got more ideas that I'm gonna throw out there. The one that I really want to do, the one I really want to do is I want to do a constitutional amendment that says that if you're the sponsor of a bill declared to be unconstitutional, you have to personally reimburse the state for attorney's fees. That'll stop that crap.
I like that. I'd like to throw out one thing about the organization for the abortion amendment. One thing, I've been in committee arguing against a lot of these proposed bills to restrict canvassing and so on. Every damn last person that speaks for it is bringing up nonsense BS instances with the abortion amendment.
And let me tell you, I told you I represented the Cherokee. And so I had an entire crew of investigators all across the state with cameras recording the Choctaws, canvassers, and all the representations and things that they made. And I have a lot of video that they took of disputes with respect to the abortion canvassers. Dude, it's not the abortion canvassers that are losing their shit. It's not the Choctaw. No, it's the they are, they were the meanest group of people. I mean, it's just horrible.
Testify about how sweet they were and just.
It is. But
Questions?
that's just to the side. Y'all raise your hand. What?
I was just gonna ask you, what's the name of your building?
What's the name of the what?
Your
Amendment seven?
Oh, well, it's very simple. It's probably at the 14th grade reading level. It's an amendment to amend the initiative and referendum amendment.
Amendment to amendment. I gotta write that down.
Yeah, or the initiative referendum process. That's all it is. Yeah, that's what it's called.
But
The BQC is called Save AR Democracy. Save Our Democracy. That's what the
And
BQC
it
is.
seems to me that in the eighth grade reading level bill, there was an out for you. Because you had filed it, because the bill actually contains a provision, I believe.
Yeah.
That will allow you to not be at the eighth grade reading level.
Oh, it is true. And their double filing bill was, we kept filing multiple petitions on the FOI trying to get that approved. So, you can only file one thing at a time. And immediately when the period products didn't get their signatures turned in, I immediately refiled that with the Attorney General and got that ballot title approved. And now they passed this bill that says, oh, I'm sorry, anything that was approved before the general election is not valid, so
That was also.
I'll resubmit that thing again because, I'll resubmit that again.
That is also targeted at the education amendment,
Yeah, I mean,
because we refiled before and.
so,
So I have like a strategy question. We talked about this last time we all got together. And I am questioning whether it's my opinion that we would be better off just doing that. Not having 7 people in the Walmart parking lot with different amendments and different ballot initiatives. And I know this is difficult for people like women's health. But if we can get yours done, it seems to me that 2 years later, we
Sure.
could actually get through some of these hurdles. Instead, so that's just my personal opinion, but I have a question for you. Is it your belief that this ballot initiative that you're proposing will not have to, in addition to having things notarized, also have to have the wrapper? And also will we still have to be reading that out loud to everyone? And, all this
Right.
And can we
legislation.
have water?
Those are bills that I really believe that the federal court will say, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
So I
Especially
think-
the reading one to me is the worst one
Oh,
of all of them.
So, yeah, and I agree that I agree. There's a United States Supreme Court case, and not really an old one on point that makes it, some state made them wear a button and all kinds of stuff. And they're like, no, think about it seriously. That's why I argue with the Republican people about it again. I said, this is our constitutional right. It's free speech, it's petitioning, it's our right. What if I went out here and made all these laws that restricted your guns or restricted your religion? You would be so pissed off. Why? What's the difference?
It's like
The difference is you're gonna mess in my pot.
It's like Senator Sullivan pointed out to me today, we don't live in a democracy.
Right.
Well, he's about to find out.
Yeah. Constitutional republic.
But you're right, all
That's
the
one of the things in constitutional republic.
No, I understand,
That's what they always
know,
say.
I understand that it's a.
So we're almost out of time, so I just want to ask, is there any parting word that you'd like to give this esteemed group in either direction? Any parting, yes,
All the talk about all these restrictions for petitioning and everything, is this in regards to, I attended the committee meeting and you spoke, and I think I even shared some, ATV or someone even covered it. Is this in regards to that, I didn't get to stay for the whole meeting.
yeah,
can't remember the name, of the things that they were going over, even though I made signs and held them up in the hallway.
yes, that was dealing with these issues, absolutely, yeah.
My parting word is that we said at the outset that, the judiciary is the last line of defense for things that are passed by the legislature, for interpretation, et cetera. And at least in state courts in Arkansas, Rich brought this up a while ago. Judges are elected here, and so we still have, as the people, the ability to determine who these judges are who are interpreting these unconstitutional statutes. And so I think that's something that we need to really spend a lot of time and focus on, is who we're electing to the judiciary in Arkansas, because to me, circuit judges in Arkansas wield about as much power as anybody, depending on the case that comes in front of them. So I think that's something to always keep in mind.
And the bad thing about the judicial elections is they occur in the primary, guys. I mean, you know, it's when people are not really paying attention to them, next thing you know, like, wait, you know, unless it's a runoff, it's done.
Yeah, that's right.
It's also really hard to find out which one you should vote for.
Yeah.
All day.
Yeah, so that was something, and if you don't think it matters, you know, my gut hunch, you don't think it matters, you have Karen Baker running against Rhonda Wood. And I mean, Rhonda, the favorite of the Republican Party, overwhelmingly. But she wrote that doggone opinion, taking that reproductive health care measure off the ballot. And you know,
They hate her now.
personally believe that there was enough people that said, that's my deciding thing. I'm a single issue voter, and boom. And so I said, that's my 5%. So what you can do, we're gonna get this thing approved. I hope national people come in and help. But one of the things that really entices them is this big grassroots effort. So just get we'll get all the petitions, just get people going. You know, we'll find it, we'll do the
I
process.
think there's gonna be a lot of groups we would not normally call on, like the veterans that are.
Oh, everybody.
Protesting. We just heard today that the Arkansas food banks are gonna have a lot of its funds taken away from national.
That's right.
So now we've got, what did I say the other day, 67 food banks in Arkansas, in Little Rock alone. Now you've got all those volunteers.
Steve and I have both been on the board of the trial lawyers before, and you know, they're a lazy bunch of people. But you know, they see that their livelihood is gonna be taken away, you know, that might motivate some of them to do something. And you know, if they're not gonna provide sweat equity, then they can just provide money.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go. JP, any final words, Sarah?
Yeah,
Final words?
My parting words are, please stay engaged, please read, be aware, talk, share information in every way you can on every level, especially the ballot initiative process, also in the legislature, and obviously as you can in the judiciary. Stay engaged.
Sarah?
Don't give up hope.
Ditto.
Yeah.
Ditto. So,
We got it, we're gonna win it eventually.
so I just want to point out just a couple of little things. Number one is that I believe that it all starts with education. And I believe if we don't start really bringing civic education to our communities, they're not going to understand what that petition is. And we're going to have a whole lot of explaining to do, right? So to me, it's about education. So I just want to tell you about 2 more educational opportunities, tell your friends about. Tomorrow night at 6 p.m., we are doing a Zoom version. It's just called Stand Up, Speak Out. And it's designed for people who want to be involved in what's left of the session, to be able to just physically be present in committee meetings or to testify. It's going to be in Zoom. If you go to the Arkansas Civic Action Network website, which is arcaction.net, under the calendar, there's the Zoom links are right there. And we're doing that with Indivisible. So because you guys know, everything we do is collaborative. And so we try to always be working with community partners when we're doing things. So that one's with Indivisible. On Thursday, we're doing one with the League of Women Voters, which is also on Zoom. That's at 6:30. And it's called Be Ready for Your Chance Encounter with Your Rep. So the idea is that all of our representatives will be home next week. They'll be in district, and you will have the opportunity to run into them at church, at the donut shop, at Starbucks, wherever you happen to be. You might just see them. And it's really important that when you do, you can take that opportunity to say, hey, You know, I'm Gail Choate, and I want you to know that I'm really concerned about direct democracy, and I hope that you would pay special attention to bills that are gonna thwart my voice. Please vote, do not pass on anything that comes, you know, whatever. You have the 30-second, right? You have a minute. So it's called, Be Ready to, for a Chance Encounter with Your Rep, and that is sponsored by the League of Women Voters, and we'll be doing that on Thursday night. So there's a number of those things that are coming up, so I want you to be aware of them. If you aren't already checking our calendar on our website, everything we do is there. There's registration links, or there's information about where you can go. And we would just appreciate you passing the information on to others because, again, I'm an educator, right? So I think everything starts with education. So speaking of education, our dear friends at the ACLU have brought along some pamphlets, which I think you should be passing out to people. They're called Know Your Rights as a Protester and Observing and Recording Police, okay? Great information in these, and as people become more politically activated and are out protesting, it's really important we know what our rights are and we know how to keep ourselves safe and protected. So these are available for you all, and Kevin and I are talking about doing a workshop as well, you know, for the public on that issue, so we can try to get the word out. So Arkansas Civic Action Network, our job is just to facilitate, right? Like, we're not, Davis and I aren't sitting at home writing curriculums. We're not, well, a little bit, we're organizing curriculums, but you know, we're not writing them. We're trying to find the partners, right? The Davids who can talk about direct democracy, the JPs who can talk about advocacy, and how to, you know, help be an ally to different communities. And Steve talking about like what happens when it actually gets into the courtroom and elections. I hope Steve is gonna keep us posted on the election stuff. You know, and then our friends at ACLU about all of these other rights issues. So if you know of organizations that are doing good work that could use some help on the educational piece, that's what we're there to do. So we'd love to get your recommendations on that. This QR code, because this is our last time, is gonna just bring you to a link that's gonna ask you for some feedback about our sessions, right? Number one, we want to know how we did, right? We want to know what we can improve upon, what you liked, what you didn't like, what worked, what didn't work, of course. And then any comments that you would share with us, we would just really, really appreciate it. And I just want to thank, you know, you, the four of you, for spending your evening with us and for helping us learn so many more new things and to see more places where we can be involved. So thank you. So thanks to our panel. Are you a team graduate? David for bringing cupcakes. With that, you know, we'll hang around for a few minutes. If you need your parking ticket validated, we'll need to see Marta to make that happen. And thank you for being here, everybody. Oh yeah, we need a picture. Picture? Can we do a picture real quick? We don't have any taken. I will take one of these.
Doesn't do that. But I know they don't got a lot of money. I'm more like the Arnold family.
So get a picture in the picture.
Yeah, come on. Here we go.
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Nice.
Oh, definitely from our point.
Thank you.
I
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Are you going to,
I'm probably gonna go home.
yeah. Yeah, like we run out of things we can do, you know? Great time. Yeah.
Okay. I know who that is. Yes.
Yeah, because she's mentioned you and coming
Good
back.
place down there.
Every time I see you, I keep forgetting that.
Yeah, absolutely, sure thing. I'll be looking at that email, and I'll do my best to be there Monday.
Yeah.
Make it, but, send that email.
You know, Craig?
Thank you.
I don't know.
You know Henry.
Henry, yes, is it Henry's son?
Prince Henry's son.
Okay, because there's Henry and David Denise.
Right.
Denise.
Excuse me, not Henry, it's David.
Yeah.
Craig is David's son. David's the baby.
Correct, yeah, and then David. There's also, well, that's David Mitchell.
David, JP, good to see you guys.
Yeah, but yeah,
David's son.
David Hodges. I think he should be practicing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure he is. but
Well,
yeah.
you know, so my kid, his granddaughter, we were all out to dinner. He was there with his wife.
Yeah.
Who ironically left my dad was stepdad.
Oh, yeah.
And he was saying, yeah, I tried to retire once. He didn't tell us.
Yes.
He said, I tried to retire once, and I learned that 10:30 in the morning TV is very boring, so I went back to work. I think the reality is Mary kicked him out of the house. She couldn't stand having a career.
Their sister.
She's
Plastic Methodist.
isn't she Mary Sheen? Mary Shue. That is his sister. She was married to Jerry Shoes from like BB.
Yeah.
That's Jay's. It's Jay and Craig.
Oh, that's right, that's it, right.
Yes. Okay. Yes. No, so I'm gonna try to get you don't push it, right?
Like, okay, whatever, we'll just do it. The problem is I see it. It still says recording.
When you were saying about the.
You boil it down from whatever reading level naturally. That's the way I see it, it's nothing whenever past the 18. As I mentioned, the phrase in a